For 10 years, I sat in the quiet corners of therapy rooms, coffee shop confessions, midnight text marathons, and tear-streaked steering wheels. I watched the same pattern repeat across continents, income brackets, and personality types. The most lethal women never yell, they execute. And today, with the calm authority of someone who has cataloged every silent incision, I am going to hand you the scalpel to dissect their artistry before it dissects you. This is not about listening for red flags. It is about seeing the invisible threads that stitch your dignity into a puppet show you fund, perform in, and applaud. Let us begin. The calculated emotional famine arrives without announcement, like a power outage in a city that prides itself on neon. One day the affection is abundant. Good morning texts laced with emojis, spontaneous compliments that land on your ego like warm rain, physical touch that feels like oxygen. The next day, the supply simply stops. No fight preceded it. No explanation follows. Calls go to voicemail with polite efficiency. Replies shrink to single syllables delivered hours late. She is not angry. She insists if pressed. She is just tired or processing. The intent is surgical. To starve the attachment circuits in your brain until the pangs of withdrawal compel you to overfunction. You send the double text, then the paragraph apology for a sin you cannot name. You offer solutions, grand gestures, therapy suggestions. Each escalation cements the new hierarchy. You chase, she rations. The famine is never permanent, just long enough to train you that warmth is a privilege you must audition for repeatedly. By the time you notice the pattern, your self-respect has been metabolized into her control. Observe the sudden absence, not the spoken excuse. The silence is the strategy. The weaponized growth narrative cloaks itself in the language of empowerment seminars and pastel Instagram quotes. She announces a boundary or a season of self-care with the serene confidence of a yogi who has just discovered kale. Overnight, behaviors that were once negotiable, transparency about plans, reciprocal emotional availability, basic accountability, become violations of her healing journey. Question the timing and you are triggering her. Request clarity and you are controlling. The brilliance lies in the borrowed legitimacy. Who dares argue with personal evolution? Yet beneath the spiritual jargon lies a classic power grab. The narrative reframes her withdrawal as enlightenment and your entirely reasonable need for consistency as toxicity. You find yourself apologizing for expecting the same woman who pursued you at 2 a.m. 3 months ago to now answer a text before midnight. The growth is hers alone. Your role is to finance and applaud it while your own boundaries gather dust. Watch for the sudden vocabulary upgrade, words like alignment, capacity, energetic maintenance that arrive simultaneously with emotional absence. Therapy speak in the service of evasion is still evasion. The gentle gaslighting of perception operates like a slow-acting poison that convinces the body it invited the toxin. It begins with microscopic revisions. I never said I'd be exclusive, when 2 weeks prior she deleted dating apps in front of you with theatrical flair. You're remembering that wrong, delivered with a sympathetic tilt of the head that suggests your mind, not her story, is the unreliable narrator. Over time, the edits compound. The evening she flirted with an ex becomes a 2-minute catch-up with an old friend you're blowing out of proportion. The promise to split the vacation cost morphs into, I thought we agreed you'd handle it since you earn more. Each correction is soft, concerned, almost maternal, never defensive, which would grant you footing for debate. The goal is not to win an argument, but to erode the ground beneath every argument you might have. When your memory itself feels negotiable, self-doubt becomes the permanent houseguest. Record conversations if ethics permit. More importantly, trust the mismatch between her serene retelling and the knot in your stomach. That knot is your last remaining unbiased witness. The quiet financial pressure test never utters the word money. Instead, crises bloom with botanical precision. The transmission that unexpectedly fails the week rent is due, the once-in-a-lifetime certification course that requires non-refundable enrollment by Friday, the family emergency that needs a plane ticket you can pay forward into our future. Each incident is framed as misfortune, not strategy, and delivered with wide-eyed gratitude for your generosity of spirit. Refuse once and watch the emotional climate shift. Subtle disappointment, a sigh that lingers like perfume, the quiet implication that real men do not hesitate when loved ones suffer. The test is twofold. First, to establish you as the default crisis ATM before rings or shared leases exist. Second, to anchor your identity in provider mode so thoroughly that later equality feels like abandonment. Track the ratio of her emergencies to her contributions. A woman weaponizing misfortune will display a statistically improbable streak of bad luck that evaporates the moment you set a boundary. Coincidence has limits, manipulation does not. The strategic ambiguity is the fog machine of modern dating. She refuses labels yet posts couple photos angled just enough to spark speculation. She discusses our kids in hypotheticals while correcting anyone who calls you her boyfriend. The limbo is not accidental. It is the entire architecture. By keeping the relationship definitionally shapeless, she retains unilateral exit velocity. You cannot technically leave what was never technically begun. Meanwhile, your investment compounds: time, money, emotional real estate, introductions to family. The ambiguity functions as an emotional prenup, written entirely in her favor. When you seek clarity, the response is a masterpiece of deflection. Why do we need labels when what we have is so special? Translation: why grant you security when insecurity keeps you performing? The dangerous woman knows that hope is a renewable resource. She harvests it quarterly. Demand the label or walk. The silence that follows your ultimatum will speak louder than any promise. The manufactured vulnerability is a curated trauma portfolio offered like a limited edition NFT, rare, emotionally expensive, and non-fungible. She discloses just enough: abusive ex, childhood neglect, a betrayal that broke my ability to trust, to activate your protector circuits. The stories are never volunteered spontaneously. They surface at 1 a.m. after you've expressed a boundary, or right before she needs a favor that reasonableness would deny. Once the empathy deposit is made, it earns infinite interest. Her flakiness becomes trigger response, her secrecy, self-protection, her criticism, honest communication, I never got growing up. The trauma is real enough to pass a polygraph, but selective enough to function as a get-out-of-accountability-free card. Verify patterns, not tears. A woman genuinely healing integrates feedback. A woman weaponizing damage deflects it. Your compassion is noble. Your discernment is survival. The selective memory amnesia erases her own promises with the elegance of a magician palming a coin. I never agreed to meet your parents this month, she says, scrolling idly while your calendar app glows with the reminder you both set. Commitments dissolve the moment they become inconvenient, replaced by a gentle rewrite that positions you as the confused party. The amnesia is never hostile, just faintly puzzled, as if she's reading a script you misremembered. Over months, the ledger of who said what tilts entirely in her favor. You begin sentences with, I thought we, and end them with apologies. The tactic keeps you off balance and perpetually renegotiating reality on her terms. Document agreements in writing, casually. The woman who bristles at a confirming text is already planning the rewrite. The gradual social isolation begins as flattery. I just love when it's us against the world. Weekends that once included your friends shrink to quality time for two. She doesn't forbid, she sighs. A heavy theatrical exhale when you mention the guy's trip, a wounded, I guess I'll figure out my birthday alone if you accept a weeknight invitation. The isolation is incremental, always justified by her anxiety or past experiences with your friend's energy. Soon, your support network atrophies from disuse, and she becomes the sole interpreter of reality. When the relationship inevitably strains, you face it alone, your perspective untested by outside oxygen. Maintain your ecosystem. The woman who needs you friendless is curating an echo chamber with herself as the only voice. The future-faking mirage paints cinematic tomorrows, Greek island vows, golden retrievers named after your grandfathers, a house with the porch swing she always dreamed of, then pivots the moment today requires sacrifice. The visions are vivid enough to anesthetize present discomfort, but vaporous enough to evade accountability. "We'll figure out the details later" becomes the mantra that postpones every hard conversation. The mirage keeps you building a castle on a cloud while she retains a parachute. Anchor promises to timelines. The woman who resists calendars is selling hope futures, not partnership. The emotional thermostat calibration gives her remote control over your mood. A compliment here, a subtle dig there, affection dialed up precisely when your loyalty wavers and dialed down the moment you relax. The swings are never dramatic enough to justify confrontation, just enough to keep your nervous system scanning for the next hit of validation. You become a sailor navigating by her emotional weather report. The thermostat is the ultimate power retention device. Why leave when departure would mean withdrawal symptoms? Log your feelings independent of her input. The man who needs a mood ring to feel worthy has already surrendered the remote. The silent scorekeeping ledger tracks every favor, every dollar, every emotional labor point with forensic precision, yet never produces the balance sheet until the breakup monologue. "After everything I did for you" arrives as a shock because the everything was never quantified in real time. The ledger ensures that any attempt to address imbalance is reframed as ingratitude. The entries are invisible until weaponized. Keep your own receipts, literal and metaphorical. The woman who tallies in silence is preparing the closing argument you'll never rebut. The preemptive empathy block strikes the moment you voice hurt. "I know you're upset, but imagine how I feel." Your pain is acknowledged only to be trumped, creating a hierarchy where her emotional weather always takes precedence. The block is delivered with such tenderness that objecting feels cruel. Over time, you learn to swallow legitimate grievances to avoid the guilt trip. The block is the conversational kill switch. State your need anyway. The woman who centers every conflict on her feelings is editing you out of the story. Gentlemen, her words are background music. Her silent patterns are the script. The dangerous woman's genius is that she never gives you a villain monologue to quote in therapy. She gives you plausible deniability, gift wrapped in concern. Your power lies not in decoding every smile, but in refusing to audition for a role whose lines keep changing. Observe the famine, the rewrite, the thermostat, the ledger. When the cumulative weight of subtle incisions outweighs the spoken affection, walk. Not in anger. Anger is the reaction she has already scripted. Walk in the quiet certainty that your peace is non-negotiable. The silence of a dangerous woman is her most elegant weapon. The clarity of a prepared man is his unbreakable shield. Your self-respect is not up for negotiation. Trust the knot in your gut. It is the last honest voice you have left. Subscribe, share this with the brother who still thinks love should hurt, and build a life where your dignity sets the thermostat. I'll see you in the next monologue. Until then, stay dangerously awake.